Hello and welcome to the CAS Autumn Event 2020 and this keynote talk by Anne-Marie Imafidon, which is on educating for the future now, the tech landscape and why tech needs diversity. My name is Wendy Piccinini and I am the CAS Outreach Manager for London and the East of England and host for this session. We are also joined by Tim Wilson, who is the moderator and will be monitoring the question window. Shortly, I will introduce Anne-Marie, but just before I do, I have a couple of things to say. In terms of housekeeping, during the session, please use the question window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions. The top of the window has an orange rectangle, which can be expanded or collapsed. Tim will be making a note of questions posed there, and these will be answered if time allows at the end. If time doesn't allow, responses will be posted on the CAS forum and across CAS social media channels. There are two hashtags for this event, hashtag CAS Autumn Event and hashtag CAS Virtual 20. As a reminder, all attendees are in listen-only mode. So, please let me introduce Anne-Marie. From child prodigy to MBE, Dr. Anne-Marie Imafidon is a keynote speaker, presenter, and co-founder of STEMettes, the award-winning social enterprise inspiring the next generation of females into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Being the youngest girl ever to pass A-level computing and going on to be one of the youngest ever to be awarded a master's degree in mathematics and computer science by the University of Oxford, aged 20, Anne-Marie unsurprisingly continued to soar. In recognition of her influence and achievements, she was awarded an MBE in the 2017 New Year's Honours for services to young women and STEM sectors. In June 2017, she became an honorary fellow at Keble College, Oxford, and in 2019, she was voted the second most influential woman in tech in the UK by Computer Weekly. And I know she is very excited to be delivering this keynote at the CAS Autumn Event 2020. So over to you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you very much, Wendy, and hi everyone. Thanks for joining us for this event, and I'm looking forward to everything else that we've got planned for the rest of the week. So excited to be kicking it off and be talking to some of my favourite people who are teachers and educators, kind of angels, angels hiding in plain sight, who are doing an incredible job. So I have tweaked the title, the promised title today, from the tech landscape and why it needs diversity, and shifted a little towards this new title, educating for the future now. So I think this kind of really well describes some of the things I've been grappling with over the last couple of years, a lot of the things that you're up to, and some of the ideas that I want to share about, given that you are not educating children for the topics and the jobs and the careers that we have now, but actually for what happens next. And this is actually quite a little bit of a quote from a tweet that urban teacher Mark Martin, who I know you'll be hearing from later on this week, kind of tweeted out, I think last week or the week before, about the fact that actually a lot of the jobs that the young people we're working with and educating at the moment don't exist. The jobs that they'll be doing don't exist yet. And so how do you educate someone for something that doesn't exist? So I thought I'd start off by talking a little bit about my journey. And for me, technology and maths has always been a part of who I am, my personality type, I guess you could say, but my driving force. It's always been something that I really loved from the age of about 4, which is this photo here on the kind of left-hand side of the slide. Me outside my parents' house in East London, they were renting, kind of looking a bit cheeky because I'd probably just tried to take apart something else in the house, whether it was pens, whether it was VCR players, remember those. I was constantly trying to understand, like, why does that work? How does that work? How do they fit together? Why does that fit together that way? You know, what can I do now that I know that you can put one black rectangular object into another black rectangular object and have Lion King show up on a third black rectangular object? What else can I put in this first one and what will come out at the end? And so for me, that's what this has always been about. This has always been about understanding the logic and knowing what you can do with it. And so that was why I had quite a unique, that's part of the reason why I had quite a unique educational journey, and have ended up still being this technologist, still being this someone very much excited about what is possible, what could come next, but also about solving problems and saying, if we know we can do this, then what happens next? And so for me, I've been really fortunate to have the right kind of people along that journey, a kind of child prodigy journey through to kind of adulthood, who've been really supportive. There's lots of people who haven't been supportive, but I always love to talk about Mr. Davis, who was our head of maths in my primary school, who kind of noticed that there was a lot of things that I was kind of running through and skipping through and enjoying, and that was why I was being slightly disruptive in class. And so kind of had a bit of a word with my parents to say, okay, cool, she's bouncing off the walls, being a bit difficult. Why don't we see what else we can give her so that we're able to concentrate and the 29 other children can focus on the matters at hand across our different subjects. So really, really thankful for having teachers like Mr. Davis as part of my journey. But for me, kind of that STEM choice has always been the obvious one the whole way through. That whether it was computer science, whether it was ICT, whether it was maths, and that's always been the choice that I've been able to make and that I've made, right from the early GCSEs through to doing the A-levels, through to graduating from Oxford in maths and computer science, and then as a technologist in the industry. So it's always been something that's been part of my path and part of the choices that I've made. And so that's why, it's part of why I set up STEMettes. I think for me, having those formative, positive STEM experiences have stood me in really good stead. They've opened up so many opportunities for me, put me in so many interesting places. And so I definitely saw the value of having really positive, formative STEM experiences and allowing other girls and young women to be able to do that. And for me, I think it was having that in school, but also being able to explore and take things apart outside of school, which is what has allowed me to see myself as a technologist beyond what we necessarily have in the curriculum. As much time as we can spend at school, there's a lot more time that we spend having other inputs and talking to other people. And so STEMettes has been there kind of not to replace school in any way, but to supplement the experiences in particular of girls and non-binary young people who, you know, have a curriculum, have exams they need to pass or get grades for, have things that they know that they need to do kind of as compulsory, but also have the agency to make options or choose options in year 9, but even more so to know that even if you didn't make those right choices age 13, that there are other things you can then do, and there are other elements of STEM and technology that will be part of whatever it is you end up doing. And so for us, everything we do is free for them to attend. It's always fun, there's always food, and we work with schools, we work with partners, we work with families and community groups to be able to kind of open up lots of different opportunities. There's 2 videos here I was going to share. I think I'll jump to the second one. I think for us, same, maybe not even same, probably to a lesser extent than most of you listening in, the pandemic has presented its own challenges. I think for us, it's been really interesting to see how do we convert the STEMettes experience, which is the free, the fun, the food, and some other elements I'm going to talk about shortly, into things that are still as impactful and can still give girls those really positive, formative STEM experiences. So initially, actually, so we've just announced lockdown 2 for England, but when lockdown 1 was announced, we kicked, as a kind of knee-jerk response, kicked off the STEM mode in series of events. This was 13 weeks that we ran online for girls and young women to have kind of STEMette experiences whilst they weren't able to necessarily physically get to school, but to allow them to kind of continue to be inspired. So this was STEM mode in. So I'm going to play a really quick video that maybe gives you a flavour of what life looks like now, if you are a STEMette, just to give you a flavour of what's going on. So hopefully this should work.
During the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, STEMettes hosted 13 weeks of tutorials, role model sessions, and a STEMette activity club across 3 platforms. More than 3,000 globally tuned in for STEM mode in.
Who's going to be the first one in? Welcome in. I'll introduce who this person is down here. Geraldine,
Sheila Scott.
and across we've got Safe Talk Science Joe. Hi Joe.
Roma.
Regina, fantastic people like Lola.
Bernice, you are a pilot, a mum,
And you're also the founder of the Sweets Company.
Yes. Today's theme is entrepreneurship, like a nanoscience, Arabic, agile, satellite.
Musical engineering.
So I work at the European Space Agency.
Abbey Road Studios.
GCHQ. Did somebody say Just Eat?
Well done to everybody that sent images in, everybody that did the show and tell, and to everybody that's still flying these paper planes at home. We're really proud of you for sticking in with STEM Mode in and joining us so consistently.
Thank you.
So that was just a little bit of a flavour of kind of what we get up to as students. But the title of today was Educating for the Future Now. And I always think it's something that we need to kind of pause maybe and think about when we talk about the future. Like what do we imagine? What do we think of? This is a Guardians of the Galaxy-esque type of scenario. We've got silver buildings and flying cars. It almost looks like the Burj Khalifa there in the middle. But when you think about the future, what is it that you have in mind? You know, how far forward are you thinking? What are you considering? How much of a difference is it from what we have today? And I think it's one of those ones that, you know, everyone has a different set of hopes, maybe in dreams for the future. We all have our own fears for what happens next. But also, I think it's something for us to consider that it's not just something that's going to arrive one day and then be rolled out. It's kind of a slow evolution. It's kind of a couple steps here, a couple steps there that's taking us towards what that future is going to be. And I always love to talk about the example from Knight Rider, which is a show in the 1980s, where someone would fight crime with a car that they talked to, and it would kind of fight crime with them, but they'd be talking to the car. And it was quite a big thing for anyone watching it kind of in the 80s to think that you're able to talk to your car and it understand what you're saying and then fight crime or whatever else it would be with you. And I always think it's interesting for us to kind of consider, even now, I'm kind of scared to say, I don't know, Alexa, let's get some loo roll or the toilet roll, just in case there's another inanimate object that's maybe not necessarily your car, but it is able to understand what you're saying. You're able to talk to it. And it's so funny to think that there was a time not that long ago that was in the distant future and a far off thing and a possibility that now is kind of real and is here. And so I think it's definitely the adage that, you know, the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. It's something I end up thinking quite a lot when we think about educating for the future and what comes next for the young people that we work with. And as computer science teachers, I'm sure there'll be lots of you that are aware of kind of these tech trends, right? The big things that everyone's excited about, the futuristic virtual reality and all the possibilities that come with it, smart technology, smart cities and the Internet of Things, and, you know, being able to communicate with things and things of it communicating with them so that, you know, your ASOS parcel, you're able to track exactly where it is, or the bus, if you do ever need to get on the bus when you go to work or whatever other method of transport you have, kind of the smart technology that allows you to know where that is without human beings needing to interact with it. Robotics, of course, is huge, and even driverless cars. You know, these are all things that they're coming, right? They're here in various stages of done. They're also in various stages of hype. But when we think about the future, it's the combination of all these new kind of trends, all these new things that people are discovering and exploring that is bringing us closer to those flying cars or any of the other things that we imagine for the future. And of course, you can't really talk about the future and future tech trends without mentioning kind of the robots that are going to marry our grandchildren or take our jobs, unless you're a teacher, in which case they won't. I guess the experts can kind of agree on that at the moment. And so it's a really interesting one for us to kind of consider then, you know, the future is at the intersection of all of these things. And there's lots of possibilities that we have when we think about connecting these. And something like artificial intelligence, you know, not only does it play games really well, which I'm sure many of you will have seen this kind of demo video from DeepMind, but, you know, it's also able to appeal parking tickets and help you with legal things. We're also using AI to kind of make diagnoses and come up with new vaccines or new medicines. And it's quite a broad brush, a broad range of things that we've been able to do with this technology for us to kind of be able to build different parts of the future. Even getting creative is something else that we've been able to get AI to work on. So this is a song called Let's Make It Happen by IVA, which stands for the Artificial Intelligence Virtual Assistant. It's not a deep fake, so these are real human beings playing the music, but the music that you just heard was composed by this algorithm. It probably isn't the first piece of music as well that you've heard from Ava. You know, movie scores, gaming, background music. There's lots of places now where we're having algorithms kind of get creative and create music for us. So there's lots that is possible, but of course, you know, we're not there yet. We're not at general intelligence, where the robots literally kind of are their own beings and make their own decisions, and you know, are doing all kinds of, are marrying our grandchildren. Kind of, we're still not quite there. There's so much that still needs to be developed on quite a lot of these tech trend fronts for us to really feel like we're in the future of whatever that might be. And yet, kind of the more that we see them, the more we see certain problems that we've had so far in technology repeating themselves. 3 of them here that I'll highlight before I talk about some of the more recent issues. And these are all from technologies that, you know, should really have taken off, but took a while to get to that level of proficiency or that level of maturity in order for them to be, you know, widely used and a part of the present, I guess, or part of the established future that's the now. So the first example is here on the left-hand side. This is actually at BET a couple of years ago. Me with slightly different hair, stood next to my mate John, who's the voice of Siri. That was Apple iOS 8, I think it was his voice. So if you had the British male voice, this was the person whose voice you hear when you speak to Siri. And of course, Siri is voice recognition software, which, you know, we've been working on this for decades. I remember at university having modules on natural language processing, and yet, you know, it's only been in the last 2 or 3, maybe 4 years max that we've had, you know, whether it's Alexa, whether it's Siri, any of those voice assistants that do genuinely work to the point that we now have them in cars, or we now use them at home to do all kinds of things. And those decades, you know, some of you will remember ye olde Siri. Some of you might have a Scottish accent or a, you know, really, really beautiful, strong Irish accent, and will still see that Siri doesn't fully understand what you're saying when you talk to Siri. You know, there's the great video on YouTube, 2 Scots in a voice activated elevator, and they kind of go nowhere because it doesn't understand the accents. But of course, you know, this is something that over the decades they kind of forgot that there are people with different types of voices, and it was only when they opened it up and had people with certain regional accents, or even just women, because we speak slightly differently from men, that technology was able to take off. In the middle, this is one I love talking about, especially when I'm talking to tech executives, and this is periods, which happen, like it's the facts of life. It's been around, you know, as long as any of us have been around, if not before. And you know, when we talk about technology to do with health and health tracking, this is something that's largely been kind of mysterious or ignored, or not really deemed an important enough part of health, that so many folks have built tech platforms, health tech platforms, and completely ignored periods. There was a famous example when Apple did this with their new iOS Health. Had quite a big bit of outcry, and this kind of then was our period tracker that they ended up having. But even more recently, you know, there have been other fitness companies who've discovered the period for the first time ever, and have decided to, in all their wisdom, to build features that, you know, only last 10 days or aren't really fit for purpose. And again, it's been that thing of, you know, there are different types of people that you might be building for. How much are you able to listen to them? How much are they part of the processes that you're building? And companies really seeing how much that's limiting what they're able to do and create in terms of creating for the future. And then the final example, if we go a little bit further back to the beginning of it, is airbags and seatbelts, which is not strictly computer science. Of course, it's engineers, but you know, they're our friends. And you know, these were early groups of engineers who wanted to build a safety device that kept people safe, who ended up kind of taking their defaults, assuming who might be in a car, kind of a regular car user, and then building these devices that, you know, early versions killed women and children, which wasn't the point of the invention, but by not being inclusive, not thinking about the different types of people that they might have had using the cars, they ended up kind of building something that was not what they wanted, not what they needed, and did the opposite of what had been asked. But this is still something we see today in terms of our safety standards that we have around cars, where, you know, crash test dummies are based on the 50th percentile man. I've never been 50th percentile man, I won't be, and I'm sure many of you here also aren't 50th percentile man. And so it means that you've probably never used a seatbelt correctly in your life, which is an alarming thing to think in 2020, that we still haven't even managed to build the kind of right safety standards around the different types of people that might sit in a car. Because it's not really that surprising to see women in cars or driving them. But when we think about the tech trends and the things that we're still working on now, there's even more examples of this technology being ubiquitous, being used in all kinds of different scenarios. And so not thinking about the different types of folks that might be using it or making the use of it means that we've ended up creating more problems, I think, than we've solved. And there's quite a lot that it kind of points to. And so when we think about educating for the future now, I think it's something for us to be really conscious about, which is, what is the future that you're educating for, and who is part of that, and who should be represented in what we're creating to get to that point. And so this is something that I think is definitely important for us, especially as computer science educators, to think about, the diversity of folks that should be a part of these decisions, should be considered as we're building what we're building, especially as there's a diversity of use cases and applications for a lot of the kind of things that we think of as just theory. A lot of these are incredibly practical now, and there's a lot of lives that they're impacting, more so than any other time in computer science history. And so it's really important for us to ensure that we consider now and bake it into future computer scientists, but future users, right? Future consumers, to have this awareness and this understanding of the differences that we have, and the differences that technology needs to reflect in order to truly be useful, but actually to not end up being harmful. So 2 examples here. The first one is from a company that runs with Google. You can see there. So this was a couple of years ago. Image recognition. Yes, those are skyscrapers. Yes, those are airplanes. Yes, those are cars. Yes, they are bikes. No, they're not gorillas. And yes, that is a graduation. But more recently, this is a photo that someone's uploaded to be able to renew their British passports. That the system has kind of looked at it and said, actually, no, it looks like your mouth's open. So why don't you let us know the medical reason why your mouth might be open? And there's quite a few examples we have of kind of deviations from what we might consider the norm that are then impacting the use of technology that we have across lots of different use cases, as I've said. And I think we don't need to look far to know how we've got here, right? How have we ended up having technology that's being built that's inefficient, is missing the mark in quite a big way? I think it's definitely something of perception we talk about quite a lot, and we work on this with the CAS as well. Kind of when you think of technologists, when you think of innovator, you think of scientist or engineer, who comes to mind? I know Big Bang Theory does well or isn't doing so well at the moment, but there's lots of kind of images and imagery that we have around who is a computer scientist, who is an engineer, that is unhelpful, and that means actually you end up having a narrowing of the kinds of people who choose computer science GCSE, but also those who end up in industry or end up on as physicists and end up across these different spaces, who then don't reflect society that they're still building things for. And so I think it's really important. I love using this image here on the right hand side. I can't see any of you, but yeah, who sees a princess when they look at that image? Maybe pop it in the chat. I don't know, Tim, if we can see the chat on this. Who looks at this image and sees a princess? Who looks at this image and sees an engineer? Who looks at this image and has no idea what they're looking at? We have this thing of we've ended up having quite a warped view of who are these people that build this technology? Who is actually doing it? Not only who are they building it for, but what does it take to be successful in a space like this? Oh, the comments in the questions tab. Oh, I can't see that. That's all right. Yeah, so what does it take to be successful? And why can't this just be a dude in his dress and a hard hat? Which is always kind of a nice answer to have. Let's not project too much onto them. But it's not our fault that we have ended up having such a narrow view. This is a photo that I covertly took a couple of years ago, just before STEMETS actually, or just as I was kind of coming together with the idea for STEMETS, of a science display in a girls' school, state girls' school around the corner from where the initial photo was taken, actually in East London. And it was in their science department. This was kind of famous scientists, or scientists that through the ages kind of thing in this girls' school. And it's quite interesting kind of looking at this image and seeing kind of even, especially in that space, kind of when you think scientists, what gets reflected back at you, what do you have ingrained? And again, these are all dead white men, and there's nothing at all against dead white men, especially any that are on the event today. But I'm never going to be a dead white man, but I'm still a computer scientist and can still contribute as much as the next person. And so I think it's definitely been quite a big frustration that, you know, there's quite a lot of others that we should really be talking about and can talk about and can have alongside them who aren't dead, white and male, who have contributed to this, and not telling their stories, and kind of the erasure of them has meant that we've ended up in this vicious cycle of kind of dwindling numbers. And this is particularly important in schools. So just to run through this, I can't see comments in the questions tab, but maybe Tim and Wendy can help out with this a little bit. A bit of a quiz, pop quiz here. Who recognises any of the people we have on this slide? None of them are Marie Curie, so if that's what you were going to type, then yeah, Marie Curie is not on this slide, and neither is Rosalind Franklin, who's the other one that people tend to at a push say. So can we recognise any of these 4 women?
We've got Hedy Lamarr.
Yeah.
Did I pronounce
Awesome.
that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's Hedy Lamarr.
Yeah, Jackie's also said that. Just one of them, but
So 1 we can name across all of us here today.
yeah, anyone else?
No one else?
No. Catherine,
No.
Tracy is Catherine Johnson, question mark.
Yeah, that was the other one I was hoping that we'd hear. Yes, Catherine Johnson. So brilliant. So you got 2 out of 4 between you, which is okay.
It's one of those Grace Hopper. Have I not got that? No. Okay.
No, it's none of those Grace Hopper. Normally Grace Hopper has a quite stern face and all her naval jewelry, but Grace Hopper, she could have been on this slide, but she's not on this slide. Any others who want to guess?
I think there's a bit of embarrassment in the chat, to be honest, that people can only name 1, if that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So here we go. Here's things to take back to school tomorrow. So if we start from the left-hand side, as you know, let's start with Hedy Lamarr and Catherine Johnson. So this is Hedy Lamarr. She looks like a Hollywood actress, and that's because she was a Hollywood actress. She was the most beautiful woman actually in the world at that time, I guess they called her. And she's trivia. She is who Betty Boop was based on. She was a Hollywood actress, and then on the weekends kind of loved a little bit of inventing and thinking and physics. And so co-invented frequency hopping spread spectrum technology, which if any of you don't know what that is, you will have heard of Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, maybe. So wireless communications, that's what allows us to have them. So Hedy's definitely someone that, if you are going to talk about Wi-Fi at any point in your curriculum, please mention her and have her face everywhere. So that's Hedy. And next to Hedy, so just here is Catherine Johnson. So Catherine Johnson, if you've seen the film Hidden Figures, this is who Taraji P. Henson plays, so that's the real woman. She was a computer at NASA in the 1960s in the Coloured Women's Computing Group there at NASA, and she did a lot of calculations and computations before the computers came in and did computations. So a real example there of someone whose job has been replaced by computers, but was very instrumental, very good at what she did, and there are a lot of things that she did by hand that they trusted her more than anything else, and that's thing, person, or machine. On the very far left is Sophie Jermaine, who was a mathematician in 1700s, who ended up studying maths at a time when you couldn't really be a woman and study maths. So she ended up studying it under a male alias. And then at the end of the course, kind of they gave her her degree, and she was like, haha, I was a woman all along. And so what they did was they celebrated that by ensuring that they didn't write her name alongside those of her contemporaries, of her male contemporaries on the Eiffel Tower, when they built it and put the names of scientists of the day. And if this was a have I got news for you? My next question would be, one of these is the odd one out. And why is she the odd one out? But short on time. So the one on the right is Gladys West. She's the odd one out because she's still alive. She's in her 80s. She lives in West Virginia. She was a mathematician who figured out that we had lots of geostatic satellites going around Earth, orbiting, or kind of going around as we go around, and that actually kind of you can draw enough triangles and figure out where someone is on the Earth's surface to very great accuracy. So she's the reason that we have the blue dots, aka GPS, which again, I'm sure is something you can kind of cover in the curriculum and talk to. So there's lots of people that have been there, lots of women that have been there that we maybe don't recognize as much as maybe the greats. if we can call them that, the Zuckerbergs or Tim Berners-Lee or the rest of them, but they've definitely been there in their own, kind of contributing in their own way. So we should definitely know about them, be able to tell their stories, and we definitely shouldn't wait for them to die before we do that. But there's lots of other examples of where actually, even if we're not just going to name the women, which, you know, is a great hobby to just become a computing historian, but, you know, we definitely want to make sure that we're all taking in the different stories of the people that are here. They shouldn't have to be dead. And we don't even necessarily need to name them and spotlight their stories like I do on my podcast with Women Tech, called Women Tech Charge with the Evening Standard. There's a great book called Invisible Women that talks about actually just considering the female experience separate and being able to understand a little bit more about what it is to be a woman, to help you build policy, to help you kind of have the right kind of data sets, but also to just be a better technologist. And then there's also a fantastic book called Superior that looks at the race angle and kind of race and science and the rather kind of dark relationship that the two of them have had over the years, where actually science isn't as objective as we like to assume that it is, and actually often has been used to kind of further kind of certain social constructs, as it were. So there's lots for us to do, lots for us to consider. And I think that the main key takeaway I wanted folks to take away in terms of educating for the future is there's a couple of things that kind of wanted to kick off, is that, you know, it's small changes, it's small tweaks that means that you're able to educate more of the people that you have in your sphere of influence, in your school, kind of within your care. You're able to educate more of them on what the language of the future is. We don't know what happens next. No one can see the pandemic coming or whatever else it is that they might be, but actually having the right tools, having the right literacy is how we're able to educate folks for the future now, so they're able to understand what's going on, but also they know how they learn and they're able to continue taking on these new things. And it's the small, it's always in the small. And I think I definitely want to allow you, or kind of give you all permission, in the same way as we tell children that you learn from mistakes and failure is okay as long as you learn from it, I think we also need to embrace that there will be failures, there'll be things that we get wrong along the way. But, you know, we can take this from computer science, that iterative process is definitely what we want to be doing, and making small steps in the right direction. And I always use this example on the right hand side of this person who turns up to represent the European Space Agency on one of their biggest press events to do with Mars. And this was the person that turned up to represent them on BBC Breakfast. You can all kind of see the shirt. I'm wondering how many of you have turned up to this event in a shirt like this. But the comment on the tweet, the kind of caption on the tweet is, no, women are totally welcome in our community. Just ask the dude in this shirt. And it's quite interesting to kind of consider, you know, with this, it's about the small. You know, all of you have managed to not wear this shirt. I'm assuming, I can't see you, but you've managed to not wear this shirt today to the event. You know, you tend to not wear this, I'm sure, to school. You know to do that. There have been things that have happened that you understand that that's not necessarily something that's conducive or helps. But this person, you know, hasn't picked up on the cues, and I'd like to argue that kind of the press manager from the European Space Agency maybe didn't say what they needed to have said. You know, those folks in the TV studio maybe didn't say what needed to be said, and so we end up having something like this happen because of a series of small tweaks, small things that could have been said, small things that could have been done that didn't, that mean that we end up having the big impact of a shirt like this, or any of the kind of history, missing the HERstory that I've just spoken about. And it's important, you know, when we think about the future and what happens next, it's really important that we have lots of different people that are part of this and shaping this, and that we see that as important as the knowledge transfer is who we're transferring it to, and the inclusivity as well that we are transferring to them. And I always use this example of driverless cars. You know, if we think back to the seatbelt example, they didn't intentionally leave those women out, right? It was unintentionally they excluded. And so it's important for us to think going forward, you know, we need to be intentional about including, so that then if it's the driverless car, whatever it is that comes next, we're not going to accidentally kill a set of people just because we didn't consider them when we were creating the driverless car. So let's not repeat our mistakes of the past. And there is lots of research. I'm part of the Institute for the Future of Work that's looking at this specifically in the workplace. I'm part of the Global Partnership for AI, which is looking at this at the G7 level. You know, there's a lot of things that we're now having to look at quite seriously and say, because we didn't think about this as computer science, you know, we're now having to rely on social scientists and others to kind of play catch up after the thing has been done, just because we didn't think through everything. We didn't have the lots of different types of people as we were creating at the beginning. We didn't see it as important. So we have to see it as important because the impacts are now with each day, the impacts are larger and they're bigger. And so we're educating for this future, unfortunately, and trying to educate almost against this future of kind of the individual harms, there's collective societal harms, all the things that we're seeing and that we're noticing now that are having quite big knock-on effects. So let's keep the future at the front of our minds as we think about what we do next and how we educate for the future now. And so kind of 3 things that I wanted to take and show and share as guiding principles that work for us at STEMets that you definitely want to kind of take with you and consider as you're thinking about those that you educate and what you're training them up on. The first is this notion of STEAM, which I'm sure all of you have heard of, and the creativity that we have within computer science. The curriculum maybe doesn't prioritize this as much as it should do, but in life in general, kind of outside the curriculum, STEAM is where it's at. This is where the real innovation happens. This is the creativity that people think is just in English, perhaps, or art, that actually we have as much in computer science. And so having that as a core and having that very close and kind of top of mind, whatever it is that you're approaching, whatever examples or exercises, practicals you're doing, is really important. Kind of the lady on the right, May-Britt Moser, she won a Nobel Prize a couple of years ago in the sciences. And this image always reminds me of the fact they've done the research that you're much more likely to win a Nobel Prize if you've engaged with the arts as part of your upbringing. So I'll say it one more time. You're much more likely to win a Nobel Prize in the sciences if you've engaged with the arts as part of your upbringing, which sounds counterintuitive, right? You should be one of those people that just did maths when you were younger, and you end up being the best mathematician, or science, and you end up being the best. Whereas actually, no, you need the different parts to kind of come together. And so teaching computer science in a vacuum does it a disservice. You know, whether it's art you're bringing in, whatever it is that you're bringing in to show the creativity of what's possible with it. I think that's definitely something that we've learned at STEMets has worked really well and allow people to understand that it's not just the narrow developer or the narrow roles, or even the narrowness of just computer science as a discipline, but it's the creativity that you're able to, it's the paintbrush almost, you're able to kind of use across different things to draw them together and to solve problems. Which takes me to my second one, is the altruism of computer science, which again, we don't talk about enough. You know, it's a lot harder, faster, bigger, stronger, but rarely is it problem solving, the helping others. You know, always it's a joke, it's not a joke. You know, why should you do computer science? Well, you either want to be on the good side and help people, or you want to be an evil genius. But either way, computer science is the solution for both. And so for us, this is an image actually from a couple of years ago. We ran a tech incubator for teenage girls, and it was really interesting to see that of the 30-odd startups that came out of it, almost all of them were altruistic. All of them solved a genuine problem, whether it was TalentWorks, which was a recruitment platform for highly functioning autistic people, whether it's 4 wards, which was for young people with lifelong or long-term health conditions who had to spend a lot of time in wards to kind of connect, whether it was Tom, which was an app about periods, whether it was Free Feet, which was about improving mobility and reducing gait freezing for Parkinson's. Kind of all of these were things that were helping people, which again, when we think about computer science, I don't know how many of us are able to put that at the top of why it's something that's worthwhile, why it's something that's powerful. You know, and the true point of it, it's not just about being a millionaire and raising billions for your startup, but what is the genuine problem you're solving and who are you helping? And I think the third thing for us, which was just released yesterday actually by the kind of wider research project, has been kind of equitable practice. So this is a STEM equity compass that we've developed, or has been developed by the Institute for Education, with a big research project we're doing with the Wellcome Trust at the moment. But kind of making sure that you've got equitable practice across what you're doing. This means that you're doing things for folks that allows them to feel the power and them to have a little bit of control over what they understand computer science to be, but also allows them to be able to engage with the computer science and engage with the subject in a way that makes sense for them, and allows for the fact that they might not be a gamer, or allows for the fact that they might not be a boy, or allows for the fact that they might not be the kind of default that we have. And so, yeah, yesstem.org is kind of go pick it up and take a look at the paper. But for us, kind of equitable practice has meant, even at STEMets events, you know, we can't give the children alcohol or coffee, which is normally what you turn into code. So we give them sweets instead. And initially that was giving them Haribos, and what it's ended up being is we now have vegan sweets. Haribos you can't have if you eat halal, you can't have if you have kosher. And so we used to have Maltesers and Haribos separately. And now it's like, well, no, why don't we have something that works for as many people as possible? so you don't feel like other, you don't feel left out. And so we've ended up having vegan sweets. We will have candy kittens kind of along the way, and that's how we do what we do. So it's looking for all the different opportunities you have to be inclusive and to actually be equitable and say, do you know what, as someone that has different motivations or comes from a different background, here's how this might make sense to you, here's how this might relate to you, here's why this is something that's valuable to you, and building that into what you're doing and being quite intentional about that is quite important. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Just keeping an eye on the time. I think when we think about educating for the future now, we have to think about who we are educating and know that that's just as important as the knowledge that we're giving, but also the inclusivity of it means that, you know, there's no point giving people these computer science skills if they're just going to go off and build in their own image from their own perspective things that end up harming us and building the future that doesn't work for all of us. So that's it, educating for the future now.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for kicking off our autumn event with such an inspiring keynote. I just felt that so much of what you said this evening resonated with me. I'm sure the rest of the audience would agree with that. I just made some notes about some key things that people can take away. And as the audience is mostly educators, I think when you were talking about small changes and small tweaks, I thought, yeah, you know, we can go back to the classroom tomorrow and think about what are those small changes that can be immediately made to make our classrooms and our schools more inclusive. So I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions because I think we're just about bang on time. But I just wanted to end by saying to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. And at the end of this webinar, a short survey will appear on the screen. And we'd be grateful if you would take a few minutes to complete our survey. A recording of this webinar is also available on the CAS website after this session. So please let colleagues know if you think they'd be interested in hearing the webinar. And as I said earlier, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you at other sessions in the CAS Autumn event, and please do continue to spread the word about computing at school. Thank you so much and goodbye.